Here's my full guide on how to beat the Root of Nightmares raid. Why don't we not waste any time and dive right in? Quick note before the first encounter, this was all recorded on contest mode on day 1, so it will be easier for you and your team when contest mode is over. Okay, first encounter. The first encounter is a wide open area with kind of a left half of the map and a right half of the map separated by a large structure in the very middle. The goal of the encounter is to activate all the little DNA nodes throughout the entire area one at a time. When players are within the big glowing blue aura of the Traveler Orb plate and they shoot the Traveler Orb itself, they receive a buff called Field of Light. This buff can be refreshed in the same way, again by going back into the glowing aura of any Traveler plate and shooting the Traveler Orb itself. More on that in a minute. The wipe mechanic you have to avoid is called Sweeping Terror. If the timer on that ever goes all the way down to 0, your team is going to die. You can extend the timer by killing Tormentors, which will periodically pop up around the map. Our team had 4 players on both Ad Clear and Tormentor duty, while 2 players focused on running the Field of Light buff from plate to plate. As the encounter starts, barrier champions and 2 orange bar scions with a protective bubble will spawn in. The scions need to be killed immediately because killing them is what spawns in the Tormentors, which again you need to kill to avoid the wipe mechanic. For the 2 runners on your team, the initial Traveler Orb plate will visually direct you to which DNA node you need to go to next. Just follow the direction of the thin beam of light shooting out of the Traveler Orb. You can also tell which plate you need to go to next because it no longer looks like a DNA strand, but rather it'll look like this, a small darkish orb. When you've found the small darkish orb plate where you need to go to next, go right up to it, again with the Field of Light buff, and shoot it to activate. That will consume your Field of Light buff, but will progress the encounter. The runner will now have to go back to a Traveler Orb plate with a glowing blue aura and reactivate it to reacquire their Field of Light buff. TLDR, the runners are grabbing the Field of Light buff from the blue Traveler plate, taking it to the small black orb plate, shooting the small black orb and activating it, then backpedaling to reacquire the Field of Light buff from any glowing Traveler plate. Meanwhile, the Ad Clear people are shredding both Cabal, Champions, the Scions, and the Tormentors all together. Keep doing this until you see the message, "His hatred halts." Think of that as kind of like a tiny little breather for your team. Your team will then move to a new blue glowing initial Traveler Orb plate, and you will keep doing the same thing that you've been doing. Rinse and repeat until the encounter is over. Check the pinned comment. I'll have a link to the moment in the day 1 stream when we beat the first encounter if you would like to see a full run. Alright, second encounter. On the way to the second encounter, you'll come across these little jumper plates which will launch your Guardian if you stand in front of them and shoot the little floating button. You're going to use these in Encounter 2, so get a feel for them now. Encounter 2 has similar mechanics of Encounter 1. You'll be grabbing a buff like before and using that buff to activate those small darkish orbs just like before. However, unlike before, there are now 2 buffs, the light one called Field of Light and a dark one called Flux of Darkness. You still get the Field of Light buff from activating the glowing blue aura Traveler plate, but you get the Flux of Darkness power by activating the glowing orange aura plate. The Encounter 2 room is split into a left and right side, separated by a huge gap where you can and will fall to your death if you jump off. Split your team up into 2 groups, 3 on the left and 3 on the right. We had 2 people on each side function as purely Ad Clear, and 1 person on each side were the runners, aka people who grabbed the either light or dark buff and used that buff to activate the small black orbs. Here's where it gets tricky. The runner's path is not a straight line. While the Ad Clear folks will pretty much stay planted and gun down Cabal the entire time, the runners will very often need to swap sides of the map to reach their next small black orb. In order to do that, like I mentioned, stand in front of the jumper plate, shoot the little floating button, and get launched to the other side. This is a very difficult encounter to fully describe. Look right here, right off the bat, after I activate the Flux of Darkness power on the left, I immediately need to launch myself across the map because my very first small black orb that I need to activate is on the other side. You can tell that black orb needs the Flux of Darkness buff specifically because it has a thin orange line connecting to it. Remember, blue is Field of Light and orange is Flux of Darkness. Also, remember that again, every time you take either the light or dark buff and use it to activate a small black orb, you progress the encounter, but you also lose your buff just like Encounter 1. The runners will then need to reacquire the Field of Light or Flux of Darkness buff. Now, I'm sure that some teams did this with one runner doing only the darkness buff and one runner doing only the light buff. However, the runners on our team often went back and forth between the buffs to cut down on how often we wanted to launch ourselves across the map, because that mechanic kinda sucks. For example, at the very beginning of Encounter 2, watch, I start by activating the dark buff on the left side of the map, launch myself over to the right side, and activate my small black orb. Now, I could have gone straight orange the whole way through, launched back to my original side to reacquire another dark buff, but why not cut down on overall travel time? I stayed on the right side of the map and swapped to the light buff instead because I was already there, while the other runner stayed on the left side because he was already there and he swapped to the dark buff. If that sounds confusing to you, you can have one runner always do dark and one runner always do light the whole way through, but you're going to be launching back and forth way more frequently. Also, Ad Clear team, pay attention to your runners. When they're about to reacquire their buffs, either light or dark, group up with them immediately. Remember that anyone can get the light or dark buff if they are in the glowing aura when the traveler or dark orange symbol is shot. And Ad Clear players are going to need that buff, not for running or activating anything, but there are certain Cabal that can only be damaged by players with either the light or dark buff. To recap, runners acquire the buff, either light or dark, then head to the small black orb they're being directed to. Dark runners look for orange, light runners look for blue. It could be on your side or it could be on the opposite side. Activate the small black orb, then go back and reacquire your buff. Rinse and repeat, launching across the divide if need be. Ad Clear folk, watch your runners and join them when they reapply their buff, light or dark, to make sure you get the buff that also helps you kill the immune Cabal. And runners, try to always reacquire the buff at the same time with a 3, 2, 1 countdown, so you're always on the same page. Makes things much easier. Each time you finish a floor by getting all the way to the end of the hallway and killing the Cabal that spawn there, you will then upgrade by launching upwards to the next floor. There are 3 floors in total. Oh, and note there will be barrier champions at the end of each floor. Be sure you are prepared for that. I strongly recommend that you go down to the pinned comment and watch the second link, which has our first clear of the second encounter, as again, I know this can all sound very confusing. Good luck, try to move quick. You can use an eager edge sword if you want. Remember, there is no boss in Encounter 2, so anything you want to do to move quicker, be my guest. Alright, next I guess is Encounter 2.5. Not really an encounter, but it's kind of a jumping puzzle on the way to Encounter 3 in a huge wide open area. Out here, there are both light plates and dark plates, just like before. Here's the only thing that's different. Every now and then, a huge orange wave of light will wash over the entire area. The moment that orange wave touches your body, you will die. However, you can shield yourself from that orange death wave in the following way. First, go into a glowing blue light plate and shoot it to acquire the light buff, just like in Encounters 1 and 2. But then, take the Field of Light buff and bring it to an orange dark plate and shoot the orange nut to get the Darkness's Refuge buff. If you have Darkness's Refuge active when the big orange wave of light touches your body, you will live. Again, take the light buff to a dark plate and activate that dark plate to get a buff that will protect you against the big orange wipe mechanic. Keep following the path in the area until you reach Encounter 3, protecting yourself from the wipe mechanic as you go. Alright, Encounter 3, the Planet Room. The goal of this encounter is to move the planets around in a certain configuration. When the planets are in the correct configuration, you may then damage the boss on one of 3 plates near the middle of the room, moving from one plate to another, one at a time. When damage phase is over, you will repeat, once again, moving the planets into the correct configuration. Here's a beautiful layout of the room, thank you Cosmic Irony. Don't get confused by the numbers just yet, just take note of the following. The left side of the room is the light side, the right side of the room is the dark side, and there are 4 large triangles in the room. If you look around the room physically, you'll see that there are 3 big planets above each corner of all 4 triangles. There are also 3 more planets in the dead center of the room, more on those later. We divided our team into 2 jobs, Ad Clear, of which there will be 2 of you, one on the left and one on the right, and the runners. There will be 4 runners, 2 on the left and 2 on the right. Each runner pick one of the 4 triangles and make that your starting position. Begin the encounter by shooting any of the Cabal, and more Cabal will begin spawning into the room. Killing all 4 orange bar Centurions will spawn 4 beefy yellow bar Terrestrial Lieutenants, 1 on each triangle. Runners, your goal is to kill the 1 lieutenant who has spawned onto your triangle. You have to be the one to finish off this lieutenant, because whoever gets the killing blow automatically gets the Planetary Insight buff. Runners, when you have the Planetary Insight buff, you will notice that the planets hovering above your triangle will now be glowing, either light or dark. Remember the map of the room, how left is light side and right is dark? You want to look above your triangle for the planet, light or dark, which is on the wrong side, of which there will only be 1 per triangle. For example, my triangle was on the left side of the room, aka the light side. So when I got the Planetary Insight buff, I looked for a dark planet, which belongs on the other side of the room. When you've located the oddball out planet, go directly under it and pick up the Planetary Attunement power. Now, your job is to switch sides with the other runner across the room from you. You're each bringing the planet that is out of place to the correct side of the room and dunking it into the spot where it should be. You have to dunk it into the exact correct spot though, so make sure you and your runner partner tell each other which spot on the triangle that is. Referring back to our diagram of the room, we used numbers. Each number corresponds to a spot on the triangle. So, for example, let's just say I took the buff from number 1 on the left triangle and then brought it over to spot number 2 on the right triangle. It won't always be 1 to 1 or 2 to 2 or 3 to 3. Just make sure you and your runner partner, who again should be the runner on the opposite side of the room as you, are communicating on which spot on the triangle you need to dunk into. The planets will then move themselves at the end of the planetary shift timer, which is on your HUD. Okay, after you've done that, kill more Cabal until 4 more lieutenants spawn back into the room. Kill the lieutenants again, 1 for each runner, to reacquire the Planetary Insight buff. Now, your focus is on the 3 remaining planets hovering in the dead center of the room. With the Planetary Insight buff, you will notice that the 3 planets in the middle of the room are glowing either dark or light. Runners will now need to go to any triangle, light or dark, pick up that light or dark buff, then bring that power under the matching glowing planet in the middle and dunk it right into the plate. There are 4 runners and only 3 middle plates that need dunking, so 1 runner can focus on ad clear for now. When the powers have been dunked into the correct plates in the middle of the room, the planets in the middle of the room will all begin glowing, and you can now shoot the floating little button thingy hovering in the middle of the room. Now it is damage time. Look at the boss. Whatever color his shield is, that matches the plate you need to go to and stand on in order to damage him. For example, if his shield is light, go stand on the glowing light plate and damage until you can't anymore. If his shield is orange, go stand on a glowing orange plate and damage until you can't anymore. 3 damage phases, 1 per plate, until all the plates are no longer glowing, and that is 1 entire cycle. Rinse and repeat. When you get the boss weak enough, there will be a final stand mode. Just keep damaging him and hit him with everything you have. I know that probably sounds really confusing, so again, link in the pinned comment of our first day 1 completion of Encounter 3 if you want to see how it works in action. On the way to Encounter 4, there's another mini jumping puzzle, I guess if you want to call it that. Similar mechanics as before. Both light and dark plates get their power and bring it to the small black orbs to activate them. Nothing out of the ordinary here, very short, not even really an encounter, more of a stepping stone to the final encounter. Alright, final encounter. Your goal is to kill Nezrec. Here's a quick diagram of the room. Again, thank you, Cosmic Irony. Don't get super hung up on these L1R1 callouts, by the way. It's more of a visual tool for me to explain to you that there are 6 little DNA plates on the left side of the room and 6 more on the right. The mechanics you learned from the first 2 encounters and the first jumping puzzle will all come into play here. Divide yourself up into 3 teams of 2. 2 runners, 2 players on ad clear, and 2 players on Nezrec. Runners, your job is very straightforward. 1 of you on the left and 1 of you on the right. Just like encounters 1 and 2, you will stand on the glowing plate and shoot it to acquire either the light or dark buff. You will then look for the small black orb you will need to relay your power to. Run over to it, shoot the small black orb, then rinse and repeat. Go back and reacquire your buff, find the next small black orb you need to activate, and so on and so forth. You'll need to move quick though, and remember, 6 plates in total, so make like Sonic and gotta go fast. Ad clear, your job is also very straightforward. Kill all of the Cabal as they spawn in, one ad clear person on the left and one on the right. There will also be a fair amount of ads spawning near the middle. Try to both work on that if you can. The two Nezrec players, y'all have a fun job. You see, while Nezrec is hanging out in the back of the room, he will occasionally pick a random player to hate on. If Nezrec hates you, which you will see as a debuff on the HUD, he will essentially choice target and bully you and pop you up into the air repeatedly. As you can imagine, you don't want Nezrec hating on your runners because they need to be moving fast, not getting popped up into the air. Therefore, the two Guardians focusing Nezrec. As soon as he starts hating anybody on your team, y'all need to start shooting and harassing him back. Shoot Nezrec's crit spot and divert his hatred onto you. You're intentionally tanking his aggro so the runners can be left alone to do their job in peace. At that point, Nezrec will leap off of his platform and begin chasing you around. Two Nezrec players keep his attention and also shoot and break his crit spots, one on each shoulder and one on his chest/tummy. You'll need to shoot and break these because doing so will delay his wipe mechanic. If Nezrec glows to white and leaps up into the air, your whole team will die. Again, shooting and breaking his crit spots will delay that, which the two Nezrec players should be doing. So you got the Nez players breaking the crit spots and delaying the wipe mechanic, you got the ad clear players slaying out, and the runners are running. When the runners have finished running, it is DPS time. There's no particular location where you need to meet up and damage Nezrec. He's kind of like Rulk in the Vow of the Disciple raid. He'll run around following you no matter what, but we did find that perching up on plate L3 on our diagram was kind of the way to go. Sometimes he would boop one or two of us off the map, but for the most part you can kinda knock him around over there without him annoying you too much. But damage him wherever you want. On contest mode, I will recommend plate L3 again, but after contest mode is over, I can only imagine that swords in a radiant well on the ground floor anywhere will ruin this motherfucker. Stack as much damage as you can, probably in a radiant well, until you can't damage him anymore and you go back to square one, rinse and repeat. Final tip, remember the jumping puzzle mechanic from earlier where you could tank the big orange wave of death? You can do that in this boss fight if you're having trouble. After shooting and breaking Nezrec's last shoulder, look at the color of the damage burst emitted from that shoulder breaking. If it is light, that means whoever is the dark runner should get a dark charge, run over to a nearby light charge, and shoot it for the power. Everyone who gets that buff will be auto-protected from Nezrac's wipe mechanic. And same thing the other way. If you shoot it and break it and it's dark, that means that whoever is the light runner should get a light charge, run over to a nearby dark charge, and shoot it. Now, you technically don't need to do this. A lot of teams on day one straight up beat the race by just moving quickly. They never needed to do it, not even one time. My team did it on contest mode every time after the first DPS wave because we found it to be helpful, but you do you. If you want to see our first full clear on Nezrec, again, link in the pinned comment from the day one raid. Apologies from me, by the way, if I sound frustrated or tired in those clips. Day one raids often make you tired and cranky. Anyway, good luck, get that contest mode clear. Thank you very much for watching.